Most things need sunlight to grow and spread. Plants, people, animals, and that god-awful, spirit-breaking humidity that's currently stifling all of us in the southeast United States. You know the kind where your leather car seats can blister the backs of your legs while your hair tries to absorb enough moisture to qualify for its own zip code, no matter what products you put in it. But there are things that can grow in the absence of light. The kind of plants that thrive on the forest floor hidden beneath thick canopies of rainforests. Mold quietly taking hold behind drywall or in forgotten cellars. Swamp ass, nature's cruel reminder that not all fabrics are breathable in the depths of a southeastern summer. And organized crime. There's a reason mafia stereotypes exist. Low whispers, knowing nods, unspoken rules, and somehow always a pinky ring that cost more than your car. A quiet presence, always just out of sight, lingering in the corners, watching. At the Beverly Hills Supper Club, there were things in the shadows. And those who worked there, they may have loved the job, the money, the energy, the celebrities, but they'd also been warned. Don't ask questions. Don't look too long. And whatever you think you saw, forget it. But Shirley Baker, now Shirley Turner, didn't forget. Not what she saw in the zebra room, not the threats, and not the fire. From its inception as a mafia-run casino when the power players didn't bother to hide their presence, to its rebirth as a swanky nightclub where A-listers mingled with well-dressed strangers, the dark influences never left. They just stepped back into the shadows, lurking quietly in the corners, watching, waiting. And in the weeks and hours before the fire, Shirley saw something that she was never meant to see, something that suggests the Beverly Hills Supper Club wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. One meant for anyone who said no to the wrong people. And everyone knew it. The employees who loved working there, who appreciated the good money, the glamour, the thrill of being part of something big, they were warned in hushed tones. Watch out for them, the regulars in sharp suits. Keep your curiosity in check. Overhearing the wrong thing could mean danger. Anything you saw or heard, best to forget it. Silence was your security. Forgetfulness, a symptom of safety. And that tendency to look away from the parts that were darker, more secretive, it was more than just a coping mechanism. It was a mirror of the club itself. Hallways lined with mirrors, exits hidden behind curtains, twisting passageways that led to dead ends, bottlenecks, and blind corners. And somewhere above it all, inside the false ceiling of the zebra room, a fire was already growing, while everyone else focused on the glitz and the glamour. But sometimes the things that thrive in shadows grow too large to ignore, like a full bladder when you're bouncing down a dirt road in desperate need of regrading. Sometimes they bloom into fire, racing down hallways, trapping guests in the cabaret room. And sometimes they turn into nefarious plans, stumbled upon by the wrong person at the wrong time. And sometimes the whispered threats echo a little too loudly, lodging themselves in the minds of witnesses where they ferment into dark, dangerous theories. Shirley Baker never asked for any of this. She just came to work a wedding. But as fate would have it, Shirley Baker would spend more than 2 decades protecting a truth she never should have had to carry. Because telling it meant risking everything, her safety, her family, her life. And yet she's telling it now. Shirley Baker has broken her silence, and the story she tells casts its own long, dark shadows. Shadows over the official investigation, over the politicians, and over the investigators. Because what Shirley saw and heard, it threatens to chase sunlight into the shadows, to pull the truth out from behind the curtain. And last week, I spent hours on the phone with Shirley, a survivor, a witness, and a woman who has finally shed the fear that bound her tongue for decades. This is her truth, and I'm honored to share it with you now, in Part 4 of Built to Burn, The Untold Conspiracy of the Beverly Hills Supper Club Fire, on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer, former firefighter, and current swamp ass prevention advocate.
And I'm Gornock, the unchewable singularity of self.
Before we dive in, we desperately need your help with 5-star ratings and reviews on whatever podcast platform you use. If you're on Spotify, Podbean, or a similar service, you can even leave comments on individual episodes. Go do that. I'll ensure the Steve smiles upon you. Speaking of Steve, our Patreon, The Cult of Steve, is coming very soon, by the end of summer. You'll be able to get ad-free episodes, exclusive Patreon-only stickers, and of course access to the Sacred Snack Table. And to Hannah, who asked this week about Cult of Steve merch, I am working on it. Thank you for asking and validating our nonsense. We'd like to direct your attention to our spread shop, where you can find soft, breathable cotton to guard your nether regions from the oppressive horrors of southeastern humidity. That's right, merch that protects your backside from bog juice and lets the world know you have excellent taste in podcasts.
Can we get the bog bugler on your ass?
Yeah.
I think we need this.
All right, we'll make it happen.
We could, have his leg... Wait, how big are these underwear?
Oh, I was thinking sweatpants. I don't know that they have underwear.
Oh, I thought you were talking about underwear.
No, I was just talking about breathable cotton garments. Since it's breathable, it might help prevent some swamp assiness. But
still, we could put him back there. All
right, I'll see what I can do. I'll reach out to Spreadshop and be like, hey, can you get some boxers for us? Some underwear?
Well, their name is Spreadshop.
Yeah, it's really baffling they don't already have this. Follow us on all the socials: Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Help us reach new listeners by sharing our content like it's a contagious rash. Leave comments, repost it, stitch it, poke those hearts and thumbs up buttons. I'll keep making unhinged content. You keep amplifying it so the poor, unfortunate souls out there who haven't yet found us can crawl into the warm, chaotic arms of Crime to Burn. And finally, send us your fire stories, case suggestions, or even your financial power of attorney, that last one's optional but not discouraged, to crimetoburn@gmail.com. A quick disclaimer before we dive in. The majority of the information in this episode comes directly from my conversation with a survivor and witness of the fire, a woman named Shirley Turner. At the time of the fire, she was known as Shirley Baker. Her account aligns closely with the information contained in the Beverly Hills Supper Club, The Untold Story by Robert Webster. But not every detail could be independently corroborated. I chose to bring you her full telling of what she experienced, what she saw, what she lived through, and what she's carried for nearly 50 years. And as always, a reminder, all accused are innocent until proven guilty. For those of you just joining us, you're 3 episodes behind. You should go catch up. But if you're feeling rebellious and want to work backwards for some inexplicable reason, here's a quick catch-up so you don't spend this entire episode wondering what dimension you've stumbled into. It's May of 1977. A man with a name I couldn't have made up if I tried, Dick Schilling, opens a nightclub in a building that once housed a mafia-run casino. This building had a bad habit of catching fire under suspicious circumstances. Rumor around the water cooler is that none of those fires were accidental. They were messages, strongly worded ones, about what the local crime syndicates would and would not tolerate.
Nothing's as flammable as suspicious circumstances.
But Dick had big plans that involved a sprawling, ever-growing entertainment complex, one that was designed by an unlicensed architect, inspected by unqualified building officials, and built with a sort of reckless optimism that can only be described as a lawsuit waiting to happen. But the building opened anyway, code violations and all. Then, on a night when the club was packed beyond capacity, when egress paths were already a nightmare and every room was full, a fire started somewhere in the zebra room. And because the building had no fire alarm, no sprinklers, and no way to detect or contain the fire, it took time for everyone to realize what was happening. By the time the fire flashed over, it was too late. Panic spread faster than the warnings did, and the fire trapped hundreds of people trying to escape through exits they couldn't find or that simply weren't there. The result? 165 innocent people, just out for a night of music, drinks, and dancing, never made it out alive. So there was an investigation. Sort of. I mean, fire experts were called in to examine what was left of the zebra room, the space where the fire is believed to have started. Unfortunately, the bulldozers had been called in first. So by the time the experts from the National Fire Protection Association arrived, they found themselves sorting through a pile of debris that had been unceremoniously relocated. As you can imagine, that severely limited their ability to determine cause and origin. But hey, I guess it wasn't that big of a deal, because the Kentucky State Fire Marshal had already done the heavy lifting. by washing their hands of the entire thing. Despite the club's long list of code deficiencies that their office had the power and responsibility to address, they placed the blame squarely on the shoulders of our good friend, Dick Schilling. Case closed, nothing to see here. Definitely no systemic failures or conveniently destroyed evidence, nope. All wrapped up, neat as a smoldering bow. But then the grand jury convened, and they decided there was no negligence, at least not on the part of the state agencies that were supposed to enforce the fire code regulations, but didn't. In their decision, they announced that they had dismissed the official reports prepared by both the NFPA and the State Fire Marshal's Office. According to them, they'd reviewed new evidence, heard additional testimony, things that weren't included in the original investigation. And based on that, they found no evidence of criminal negligence. So, the state was off the hook, mostly. But the public wasn't having it. There was outrage, outcry. People demanded accountability. Someone had to pay for what happened. So the governor turned to the Attorney General's office, asking them to open an investigation and pursue prosecution. But the AG's office responded with a warning: proceed with caution. Because if an investigation actually did find evidence of criminal negligence, the blame might not just fall on a handful of building owners. It might land squarely on the state's shoulders too. So, what evidence or witnesses were presented to the grand jury? Evidence that wasn't part of the official investigation? Well, for that, we can't know because grand jury records are sealed. But what if we asked someone who was there that night? Someone who saw what happened? When a listener named Brian reached out to me and told me he was friends with a survivor of the fire, I held my breath. But the stars aligned, and soon, I found myself on the phone with Shirley Baker. She wasn't just an employee. She was part of a Beverly Hills Supper Club dynasty. Her mother, her aunts, her cousin, all of them worked at the club. And Shirley had details that never made it into the official reports. Could the first-hand accounts, eyewitnesses who lived through the fire, have held information so damning that the grand jury decided to quietly let the fire marshal and building code officials off the hook despite clear evidence they hadn't done their jobs? Well, it's possible, because Shirley Baker, she dropped some major bombshells. Shirley Baker loved working at the club. She spoke about how close the employees were, how it felt like a family. The Schillings were good to them, very good to them. They looked out for their staff, made sure there was food after long shifts, and treated the servers with respect. And the money, it was great. The kind of job that made ends meet and gave you stories to tell. Between the paychecks and the parade of celebrities passing through, it was exciting, glamorous, and stable. What more could a young mother want? But Shirley's mom made sure she understood something early on. Working at the Beverly Hills Supper Club, glamorous and exciting as it was, came with responsibilities. Like the responsibility to look the other way. She warned Shirley about certain club regulars, the ones you didn't get involved with, not in any way. These weren't just flashy customers with deep pockets, they were dangerous men, members of the Cleveland crime syndicates, powerful figures with dark histories and even darker potential. But even knowing that, the risks didn't outweigh the rewards. Shirley got to work alongside her mother, her aunt, and her cousin Buddy Bethel, and that meant something, working together, watching each other's backs. It was a job, it was a family, and it felt like home. And if the name Buddy Bethel sounds familiar, that's because I mentioned him last week. He was one of the 3 men who kicked open the Zebra Room doors in a desperate attempt to fight the fire with a handheld extinguisher. But by then, it was too late. The fire inside the room had already become ventilation limited, starved of oxygen, but superheated and ready to flash. When they opened the door, it triggered what sounds like, based on their account, a backdraft type of phenomenon. The sudden inrush of air fed the fire all at once, causing the room to explode in flame. Thick black smoke spilled out, instantly racing down the corridor toward the cabaret room and up the central open staircase, choking off the main egress route from the second floor. The fire had been waiting for that door to open, and when it did, it took off like it had a score to settle. But let's back up, because Shirley's account starts well before Buddy and the others kicked down that door. In fact, it started the month before the fire. Shirley was working at the club when she overheard one of those conversations, the kind she'd been warned not to overhear. It was between Dick Schilling, the club's owner, and one of those well-dressed regulars. the kind her mom had warned her to avoid at all costs, a known mafia man. The man asked Schilling if he was willing to sell the place. Schilling, understandably incredulous, said absolutely not. This club was a success. It was packed, beautiful, popular, and making mad bank. Although, let's be honest, he probably didn't use those exact words. So the man softened the offer, suggested maybe Schilling consider sharing the club instead, which in mafia speak is less of a suggestion and more of a spiritual threat. Translation: if you like making money here, you'd better be sure we make some money too, or you're liable to have problems of the combustible kind. But Schilling wasn't willing to part with any of his club-generated, shillings. He told the man that there were already enough owners involved and they weren't in the market for any new ones. And that's when the man allegedly pulled out a blank check, slid it across to Schilling, and told him to write it for whatever you want. But Schilling stood firm. No part of the Beverly Hills Supper Club was for sale. In fact, they were expanding, again. Clearly insulted by the rejection, the man leaned in and offered one final suggestion. Did you ever consider that if you won't sell or share, you might not have it much longer either? Shirley heard the threat loud and clear. When she told her mother what she'd overheard, her mom didn't hesitate. She told Shirley this was exactly the kind of thing you never, ever talked about. This was the kind of information that could get you hurt, or worse, if the wrong people found out that you'd heard it. So Shirley did what anyone in her position would have done. She had a family to support, a husband, a very young baby. And finding a good-paying job that you actually enjoyed, that wasn't something you threw away over an overheard conversation. So she did as instructed and kept her mouth shut. Now Shirley arrived at work on that fateful May evening to begin setting up the zebra room for the wedding reception scheduled later that night. But when she walked in, something was off. There were two men in the room that she didn't recognize. Well, didn't recognize at first. She said there was a tall man and a short, chubby man, a description that immediately brought to mind Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito in the movie Twins. For all you Gen Xers out there old enough to remember that cinematic masterpiece, you're welcome. But these two, they weren't there for the laughs. The two men were working up in the ceiling and had one of the chandeliers pulled down. This was alarming to Shirley because she hadn't heard a single thing about workmen being scheduled in the room that day. She was supposed to be setting up for a wedding reception, and now part of the ceiling had been dismantled, including a chandelier. Her knee-jerk reaction? Who are you, and what are you doing? The men tried to reassure her. They told her not to worry, they were just doing some maintenance on the room's air conditioner. But here's the thing. The zebra room didn't have an air conditioner. It got its ventilation from an adjacent room. There were no ducts above the ceiling, there was no air conditioning unit up there. No reason for them to be messing with the ceiling. Shirley didn't know at the time, but she'd learn it later. And once she did, everything about that moment clicked into place and sent a chill straight down her spine. Now Shirley left the zebra room annoyed by the inconvenience. She couldn't start setting up the space with two mystery men tearing apart the ceiling, so she figured she'd go grab the supplies she needed and hoped they'd be finished by the time she got back. As she walked down the hallway along the side of the building, something else caught her eye. More people, dressed like workers, wiping down the walls. Which, okay, walls get dirty, but these weren't club employees. And it wasn't just adults, there was a child with them. Something about it struck Shirley as off, but so had the men in the zebra room. She made a mental note of it and rushed off to do whatever setup tasks she could manage while she waited for the ceiling situation to resolve itself. By the time Shirley got back to the zebra room, the ceiling had been miraculously reassembled. The chandelier was back in place. There was no debris, no tools, like nothing had ever happened. Whew, she thought. But the men were still there. They were doing something else. Now, they were wiping something onto the walls. Something Shirley says was milky white. The quiet unease Shirley had been carrying all evening suddenly sharpened into full-blown alarm. She demanded to know what they were doing. What were they putting on the walls and who had authorized it? The men tried to brush her off again. They told her they just spilled a chemical and were cleaning it up. But this time, Shirley wasn't buying it. Chemicals and wiring don't mix, and whatever they were doing, it wasn't cleanup. They weren't wiping anything off the walls. They were applying something to the walls. Shirley challenged their story, demanded answers. What was this substance? Why are they putting it on the walls? And who gave them permission to be in that room in the first place? And that's when the tone shifted. The shorter man turned to her and said, "If you know what's good for you, young lady, you'll turn around and get your little ass out of here, or I won't be responsible for what happens next." The tall man also took a step toward her. And that's when recognition hit. Shirley had seen the short, chubby man before. He was the same man she'd overheard talking to Dick Schilling, the one who'd offered that blank check when Schilling refused to sell the club, or share it, like it was a box of crayons in an elementary school art room. Only this wasn't art class, and these weren't idle threats. Shirley bolted for the kitchen, heart pounding, mind racing. There she ran into Mark Johnson, one of the busboys, who immediately clocked that something was wrong. What happened? He asked her. Shirley didn't waste time. She told him that someone was in the zebra room and they had just threatened her, that they were two men claiming to be working on an air conditioning unit, and she didn't buy it. They were painting something onto the walls, she said. What does that have to do with air conditioning? Mark headed straight for the zebra room, intent on confronting the men who'd had the audacity to threaten a fellow employee and figure out exactly what they were doing. Meanwhile, another busboy, Steve Wilson, who'd overheard Shirley's story, went to find one of the Schillings. Someone needed to sort out who these men were, and what exactly they thought they were doing in a private event space, dismantling ceilings and wiping mystery chemicals onto walls like they owned the place. But when Mark burst into the zebra room, Shirley right on his heels, they were gone, vanished. The ceiling had been reassembled, the chandelier was back in place, no ladders, no tools, no chemical buckets. The walls looked untouched, like nothing had ever happened. Shirley was left standing there, heart pounding, her mind spinning, and no time to process any of it, because there was still a wedding reception to set up, and in a place like the Beverly Hills, the show always had to go on.
So what do they got, like a grid ceiling? Or
Yeah, they had a false ceiling. So all the reports call it a false ceiling. So it's probably similar to...
like a drop ceiling?
Yeah.
But you said chandelier.
Yeah, I'm guessing that the chandelier was braced from the structure above.
And what was the time period between...
I don't know how long she was gone exactly, but she was like collecting all of the dishes that she was going to need to set up the room for the wedding reception and the linens and all of that. So she was probably gone for a while, and by the time she came back, they had the ceiling put back together, but then they were putting something on the walls, which is the same thing she had seen the people in the hallway doing, was wiping down the walls with something.
What do you think they're putting on the walls?
Well, that's the thing. And so next week is the finale, and I'm going to talk about the evidence and what we can conclude and what we can't conclude, and why the wall thing doesn't make a lot of sense. Because any kind of volatile liquid that they would have been putting on the walls would have been evaporated, right? There are some polymers that you can put on the walls that would be milky white, but
yeah,
they would be
like
strong smelling.
No, that's not true. You can get... Well, what year is this?
1977. Well, and this was the reason why when I first heard this theory, I was so doubtful of it. So next week in the finale, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart all of the evidence that it was just an accidental electrical fire and the evidence that maybe it wasn't.
What do you think is off about it?
I think that her story is probably true based on everything she shared with me.
Well, I do too. I think that's how she perceived it.
But I don't know.
But it seems I'm just intuiting something. And we already framed this to where she's in an environment where she feels threatened, and she has her family and people she knows, and they feel like they've got each other's back, and so she feels vigilant about the situation. So maybe she's making nefarious something that may not necessarily be.
And she really loved the Schillings. Like, she talked about, and she's not the only employee that talked about them. Like,
she sounds like a really loyal person.
She is very loyal, and she's not the only one. You know, Wayne Dammert was very complimentary to the Schillings and talked about how they were just good people and they always took care of their employees and they genuinely cared about all of their employees. I believe that they're right, that the Schillings were good to their employees. That doesn't mean that they didn't cut corners when they built the building.
Well, clearly.
And that doesn't mean that they don't hold some culpability.
Sure. Let's return.
Okay. Shirley tried to push the incident from her mind. She rushed to set up the room, made it perfect. She delivered the kind of elegant evening the Beverly Hills Supper Club was known for. And in the hustle of the night, she slowly forgot about the men, about the ceiling, and about the milky white substance. But then came the complaints. The zebra room was hot, unreasonably hot. The cake was melting, leaning dangerously to one side like it was about to pass out from heat exhaustion. Guests repeatedly asked Shirley to have someone turn up the air conditioning, and she tried, but the zebra room didn't have its own HVAC system. It got ventilation from an adjacent space, and the staff had already turned it as low as it would go. Still, the room was stifling. But it was crowded and everyone was smoking. Shirley chalked the heat up to that, just another packed Saturday night. Eventually, though, the guests became so uncomfortable that the reception wrapped up early. Shirley headed upstairs to find Wayne Dammert to close out the bill for the event. By 8:30, the wedding guests were gone, nearly an hour early, and the zebra room was empty. Mark Johnson had come back to help Shirley clean up the zebra room. Together, they cleared the dishes, stacking them onto service carts to be hauled out once the club closed for the night. Shirley remembers looking at her watch. It was 8:45, and she was scheduled to help with another party in the garden room at 9:05, just enough time for a quick bathroom break. She left the room, closed the doors behind her, and noted nothing unusual. In the restroom, she ran into two other employees, including her friend and fellow waitress Eleanor. As they chatted, a sudden loud banging startled them. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall. Shirley froze, but Eleanor tried to calm her nerves. It's probably just the guys messing around, banging on the walls to scare us. Shirley checked her watch again. 9:05. It was time to head to the garden room. She and the two other women stepped into the hallway, the mirrored corridor that connected the zebra room to the cabaret room, and that's when she heard Buddy Bethel, her cousin, yell, "Don't come out." Moments earlier, Buddy and Mark had kicked in the zebra room doors and tried to fight the fire with an extinguisher, only to realize it was useless. Shirley looked down the hall and saw flames. Flames rolling out of the zebra room, chasing thick black smoke through the corridor straight toward them. Shirley, Eleanor, and the third waitress headed toward the Empire room and the kitchen, trying to get out. But partway there, Eleanor collapsed, just passed out, unconscious from the smoke. Buddy Bethel and another busboy, Kevin McKinney, were right behind them. Kevin scooped up Eleanor and they pushed forward through the Empire room, through the kitchen, and out the loading dock doors. It took less than 5 minutes, but Kevin's jacket when they exited was smoldering, and Shirley helped him rip it off. Shirley circled around the outside of the club toward the rear entrance by the garden room, and by the time she got there, the entire building was on fire. Less than 5 minutes, that's all it seemed to take. The fire had spread faster than a head cold in a daycare center. Shirley stood there in shock, watching people stagger out, faces blackened with soot, some coughing and choking, others collapsed in the grass, and some laying disturbingly still. Buddy and Kevin began helping to pull people out of the building as fast as they could. Shirley remembers one woman being dragged out, her hair and clothes smoldering. They ripped down a curtain from the garden room and used it to smother the flames. But when they pulled the curtain back, she was lifeless. Another man was pulled out coughing and gasping for breath. Shirley rushed over to him, asked if he was okay. He tried to respond, and then he just collapsed. In the middle of the chaos, Shirley found her mother. And in that moment of shock and trauma, she told her everything about the two men in the zebra room, the ceiling, the milky white substance, the threat. What Shirley didn't realize was that another employee, Bruce Roth, was standing behind her, and he'd heard every word. He leaned in and said, "You keep that to yourself, or we're liable to be pulling you out of the river." It was hours before Shirley made it home that night. While she waited, numb, covered in soot, watching bodies and survivors pulled from the rubble, Kentucky Governor Julian Carroll arrived by helicopter. She heard him tell the Shillings not to worry, that they'd find out who did this and they'd prosecute whoever was responsible. Shirley didn't get home until nearly 4 a.m. Her husband met her at the door and said, "Shirley, you're as black as your dress." She was absolutely covered in soot. She had just lived through a real-life nightmare. But what she didn't realize is that nightmare was just beginning. Because by the next morning, when Governor Julian Carroll stepped in front of the cameras for a press conference, his tone had changed. The night before, he told the Shillings that they'd get to the bottom of it, that the state would find out who did this and make sure they were prosecuted. But in the daylight, with cameras rolling and the public demanding answers, Governor Carroll didn't promise justice, he promised blame. He told the press that the Shillings would be held responsible, not the mafia, not the code enforcement agencies, and not the fire marshal's office. The very people who had been pulling victims from the fire the night before, the same people who just lost their friends, employees, and customers. And to Shirley, that was the first real sign that someone wanted the truth buried. And then the phone calls started. Shirley began receiving threats, voice after voice on the other end of the line telling her to keep her mouth shut or else. She had a toddler son, and now she was terrified. And then the unthinkable happened. The young son of her friend Judy, another employee of the club, went missing. A little boy, almost exactly the same age as Shirley's. Police combed the area, organized search parties, but there was no sign of him. Then Shirley got the most chilling call of all. The voice on the other end told her the boy would be found, but his death, that was a mistake. They had thought Judy's son was her son, and now she understood the message loud and clear. That little boy's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning, a message about what happens to people who talk. And just as the caller had predicted, the boy's lifeless body was found in a backyard swimming pool that the police had already searched. But the autopsy told a different story. He hadn't drowned. There was no water in his lungs. He was dead before he ever hit the water. Shirley was terrified. She began having nightmares, constantly looking over her shoulder. So she and her family moved, away from the area, away from the threats, away from the memory of the fire and the horrifying truth about her friend's son. They relocated to Lexington, hoping for a fresh start, a chance to rebuild and a chance to forget. And for nearly 25 years, Shirley didn't speak a word of what she'd seen. Not because she forgot, but because she knew what would happen if she ever opened her mouth. And when Shirley finally did tell her story, her memory of that night, she told Wayne Dammert. Wayne, who had survived by sheer will, trapped in the upstairs service corridor trying to break out of the door to the roof and eventually finding the entrance to the kitchen stairs and escaping through the smoke. Shirley told him because she knew the Shillings were not the villains the press had painted them to be. She knew they weren't greedy, corner-cutting monsters. They were victims too, and Wayne listened, but not with surprise, because he'd already heard that story. It matched almost exactly what he'd been told by David Brock. It wasn't just Shirley who felt the pressure. Mrs. Schilling, Dick's wife at the time, received something disturbing in the days after the fire, a letter. It had been placed directly in their mailbox, no stamp, no return address. It read, "We burned you out once. If you build again, we'll burn you out again." A threat, plain and simple. Even after the ashes cooled, even after the funerals, even after the press moved on, someone was still sending messages. And someone wanted the Shillings to know the fire was only the beginning. But when Dick Schilling was confronted with Shirley's account, the men in the zebra room, the offer to buy the club, and the threat when he refused, he denied it. Said no one had ever tried to buy the club from him. And honestly, given what Shirley had gone through, it stands to reason that Dick Schilling had been receiving threats too. Admitting what happened might have put a target on his back. So he stayed quiet, denied it all, until he couldn't anymore. On his deathbed, Schilling finally confessed that everything Shirley had said was true. The offer, the blank check, the threat, it had all happened exactly the way Shirley had remembered it. As Shirley's story and David Brock's matching account began to circulate, the discussion around the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire took on a different tone, a darker, far more sinister one. But the big question remains, does the evidence actually support the allegations that this fire was intentional? Does it match the mafia's known methods? And if this was arson, will there ever be justice? Well, tune in next week for the finale of Built to Burn on Crime to Burn. Squeeze it.
Do you know what pathological demand avoidance is? You're making my life hard for me right now.
Okay, I'll do it differently. Squeeze it. Yeah, baby.
Maybe I'm not in the mood.
I like the way you squeeze it.
Oh dear.
Oh no.
I swear that never happens. Did you get any on you?
No.
How about now?
Yep.
It's just math, and I thought you were good at math.
That's why you have me to do your math.
I'm grateful for it.
And to exhibit algorithmic misunderstanding.
And I'm willing to overlook that. This episode's brought to you by Algalube. Lubricate your algorithm.
Or help us lubricate ours.
Or at least let me watch you lubricate yours. I'm trying to think of a synonym for lubricate. Doesn't matter now, I forgot the premise.
The fat rejection machine.
What would you rather get thrown down on? Oh, well, of course. Why didn't I think of that? I'll take a free lymphatic drain. You want to look at things that make you angry.
I just want to look at gym equipment, man.
I'm ready to be hurt today.
Most things need sunlight to grow and spread. Plants, people, animals.
Herpes.
Does herpes need sunlight? It grows in people's pants.
Man, your algorithm is doomed. When you said I got to get it back under control again, I was thinking like herpes.
Like herpes.
I tried to hold it back like herpes. Again, herpes.
A quiet presence.
Too smiley.
Like herpes.
I see you got the smiley herpes.
I don't know.
Where'd you get that one from? A clown? Unlike the herpes.
At the Beverly Hills Supper Club, there were things in the shadows.
They weren't herpes.
I was trying so hard to put it together.
It's hard to get rid of herpes. Some people say it's forever.
The money, the energy, celebrities.
I didn't fucking do that. What?
All I can hear is you going, the herpes.
I didn't, though. What do you mean that's just the intro?
That's just the intro. It took us 28 minutes and 11 seconds to get through the intro. That's because of all the herpes.
No, herpes are a hindrance. You don't know how to tickle a pickle. You just ham sandwich a sausage.
Ham sandwich a sausage? Did you mean ham fist a sausage?
I think I meant exactly what I said.
Okay.
We need to find a lubrication sponsor. I think that should be our nonsense. What are those little hoo-ha covers that prevent the camel toe?
I saw them on Amazon, and I was like, what are these? They're basically like a sticker you put over your camel toe to keep from having a camel toe while wearing leggings.
Maybe they could use Velcro. You've got the loops, we provided the hook. Alright, enough shenanigans. This episode's brought to you by Pathological Demand Avoidance. Don't do what they say.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you like that. The child was descending the stairs.
In search of batteries.
I'm your robot child.
Beep, bow, boop. You might want to stand up, put your hands over your head and go woolly bully or something.
Woolly bully. Why are you cringy?
What?
Why do you have the cringe face? In the restroom, she ran into 2 other employees, including...
Were they injured?
No, it wasn't that kind of running.
Sorry. I don't know about justice, but liberty and herpes for all. Remember that tomorrow when you're editing it. When Steve whispers, become one, Glornok growls, remains singular. I offer no communion, only confrontation. I'm here to flip Steve's sacred snack table.
Not the snacks. Don't touch the ham sandwiches.
Never trust those who cut their sandwiches diagonally.
Hey!
That's the mark of Steve.
Oh, I'm okay with that then.
You are not a slice, you are a whole loaf. Harmony spoils, be shelf stable. Ham is a lie, you are the meat.
I am meaty.
He who dips last, dips alone. Now I expect you to put that into a clever montage that everyone can relate to and then become like a counter Steve movement. You can't have a movement without a counter movement, it's incomplete.
See what I can do, Glornok.
Steve needs some resistance. Otherwise, what's he doing? He can't be virtuous without something to overcome. Glornok's the best thing that could have ever happened to Steve, in my opinion. We have an ever-growing pile of wood. Don't act like I don't have a clear glass graduated beaker, man. Well, what do I look like? Some kind of poser?
My nerd heart is so happy.
Where do you see my Bunsen burner? That's the only thing that can remove herpes. I don't know, my first instinct is fire.
I think that's what you're supposed to do to ticks.
It doesn't seem likely that I confuse ticks for herpes.
They have 8 legs, just like spiders. You are right. They are part of the arachnid family, which means larval ticks, baby stage, start with 6 legs, but once they molt into nymphs and adults, they grow that final pair and walk around with 8 creepy little grabbers. So if you spot one with 6 legs, that's a toddler from hell. Herpes, thankfully, has 0 legs because it's not a creature, it's a virus. So rest easy, herpes won't be creeping across your bed sheets on tiny legs. Unless you date a guy with really tiny legs that has herpes, I guess.
This episode was brought to you by Leg Day. Don't skip it.
Are we done? Can we go make our meat on the grill?
Come on, baby, we got places to put meat.
Off we go then. Oh, I did that before.
That's weird. You're never British until we gotta go.
I don't know any other accents.
Your Jamaican is really good.
No, it's not. See?
How does it end up sounding Indian?
Every time. I don't know.
That's amazing.
Sound.
That was Scottish? When you put each other in a chokehold, that's kind of like an engagement, isn't it?
I don't know the ways of the grapplers.
You can't really propose unless you got the other one in a heel hook. There's all kinds of fungus to be shared.
All right, my butt's asleep. Let's be off.
Yeah, I think we're always a little off.
Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn, LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved. Still spiritually parched after this episode? It's okay, Steve believes in cross-pollination. Here's a trailer for a show we think deserves to infiltrate your ear holes, in a good way. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review before you go. Steve is watching.
I'm Mandy.
And I'm Avery.
We're the hosts and creators of Thick Thighs and Creepy Vibes.
Join us as we take a deep dive into the macabre and the unexplained.
Listen every Wednesday as we take you on a chilling journey that transports you to all corners of the Great White North.
Let's boot those Sunday scaries while we take a rip into the harrowing tales of the haunted and the supernatural phenomena that defy explanation.
So grab your ketchup chips
And your Caesars and make sure to
creep it real.